Today we're going to look over some online tournament results with Twilight Masquerade legal, and I'll share my analysis on what I'm observing here and how it's going to relate to the NAIC metagame. I also first want to start by looking at this tier list that OmniPoke Joe Bernard put out. This is a collection of the online data. So every online event with 64 or more players is included in this, and then he combined the points either for cup championship points or regional championship points, and yeah, put it in a tier list based on the amount of championship points these decks would earn if these online events were cups and regionals. So this is a really interesting tier list, really good data collection and analysis by Joe. So shouts out to Joe. If somehow you aren't following him and subscribe to OmniPoke, make sure you go do that. So I think the first thing we'll start with looking at Joe's tier list here is that there are 4 different variants of Dragapult, and if you separate them, none of them are doing that great. The Zot 2 build would fall into tier A, which is tier 2 on this list, and it would be under Lost Zone Box and above Snorlax Stall. But if you combine all of the Dragapult variants, Zot 2, Pidgeot, Lost Zone, and Charizard EX, then you get a total of Dragapult being the second most successful deck. Now, it's definitely important to note with this kind of thing that popularity plays a part. You know, if 50% of the field is Raging Bolt Ogerpon, then just statistically speaking, they're also going to get a lot of the points. Now, it's nowhere near 50% of the field, just an exaggeration to make my point here about how popularity can also kind of cause the decks to be more successful as well, just because there's a larger number of them. So by statistical probability, they're also going to get a lot of the points as long as the deck is actually good. So Raging Bolt Ogerpon, we'll talk about this as we look at this as the online standings, but it is one of the best performing decks right now. It's one of the most popular decks right now. It's a deck I've been testing for about however long it's been since the set has been on PTCG Live, plus a week or two. So I was already pretty sure this would be a tier 2 deck at the lowest. It might settle into being a tier 2 deck once the meta starts correcting for it, because the thing about Raging Bolt Ogerpon is it doesn't do very well against a single prize strategy. So something like Lost Zone Box Sablezard is a really bad matchup for Raging Bolt Ogerpon. Also, Lugia seems like a bad matchup if they set up. Gardevoir is a bad matchup. So, Raging Bolt Ogerpon isn't exactly like a deck with the perfect matchup spread, but it's a very strong and fast and pretty consistent deck. So, even some of the decks with bad matchups, like Raging Bolt Ogerpon versus Lugia is a bad matchup for Raging Bolt Ogerpon. I've still had plenty of games in practice so far where Raging Bolt Ogerpon wins because it's faster and can get out the gate with some 2 prize KOs that Lugia can't come back from. So the third deck up in the S tier here on Joe's list, or the first tier on Joe's list, is Gardevoir, and I'm surprised that the community saw so quickly how good Gardevoir is, but it could also be an effect of Gardevoir getting second at the Champions League Sapporo. So Gardevoir has a good matchup against Raging Bolt. It has a good matchup against Dragapult, most Dragapult variants, if not all Dragapult variants. It has a good Snorlax stall matchup. Its Lugia matchup can be tough, so I think we'll see Sinnoh and or Enhanced Hammer being teched into Gardevoir. And then a lot of the decks that give Gardevoir a problem, like Chien Pal, Iron Hands, Miraidon, we'll see that those decks are much lower in popularity and success right now. That doesn't necessarily mean that those decks won't be played at NAIC, but I do think this is a pretty accurate representation of the decks that are on people's minds right now for NAIC. And I also just real quickly wanted to look at this Japanese tier list as well. This is looking at City League results to predict for the Japanese national championships that's coming up in a few days. So that'll be the last major event we see before NAIC. And so that could also give us some more meta developments from that tournament. But here we have that Dragapult, Charizard, and Raging Bolt are in the tier 1 according to Japanese City League results and Japanese, I guess, tournaments going on between 511 and 526, because the last City League was on 5-6. So this might actually just be taking into account uh, non-sanctioned Japanese events. I'm not 100% sure on that, just because there weren't City Leagues held between the dates shown here on the tier list. But we'll see that this has Dragapult, Charizard, Raging Bolt in the top. So Dragapult and Raging Bolt are both in the top, just like they are on Joe's online results tier list, but Charizard is also up here. So Charizard does have a good Raging Bolt matchup, unless Raging Bolt just goes solo Cornerstone Ogerpon, and then if Charizard is not running a Cologne or a Gouging Fire, they just lose to Cornerstone Ogerpon. We'll see that they also have Gardevoir here in the Japanese tier list, not as high as we have it based on the online results, but you know, different data sets are going to show different things, but a lot of commonalities here. Seeing Gardevoir, you know, still staying up higher, Lugia pretty high, almost in tier 1, and then Dragapult, Raging Bolt also being a commonality between the tier lists in the top tier. So let's start looking at some tournament results here and some deck lists. So this first one here we have, this was held on May 24th, just in case you want to get some sort of understanding of how relative is this event. Was it the first day the cards were out, second day, etc.? And let's see, we had 207 players in this event. And let's check out the metagame real quick. So almost 20% of the players brought Raging Bolt Ogerpon, about 10% Lugia, about 10% Dragapult. I wouldn't be surprised if 10%, 11% Lugia is about where it's at for Masters Division NAIC. I don't think Raging Bolt Ogerpon is going to be 20%. I definitely think it'll hit 10% though. And then I actually think Dragapult will be a little higher than both Raging Bolt and Lugia at NAIC. So I would flip-flop Dragapult and Raging Bolt Ogerpon. Maybe Raging Bolt Ogerpon gets up to like 12, 13, 14%. And then we'll see that Charizard is basically like rogue deck play rate in this online event here. If we combine the Dragapult decks though, so this is Dragapult, then we have Dragapult, Lost Zone Box, Dragapult, Charizard. If we combine these decks, then Dragapult definitely gains some more percentage points like I'm talking about. So the top 8 of this event was, let's see, we have 4 Raging Bolt Ogerpon, a Raging Bolt Lost Zone Box, a Lost Zone Box, Dragapult with Pidgeot, I believe. Yeah, Dragapult with Pidgeot, and then a Reggie Drago box. So we'll check out Ogerpon first. Open this as an image. So this deck is, if you haven't seen this deck already, just a quick synopsis of what it's trying to do. The Teal Mask Ogerpon EX can accelerate energy to itself to draw a card. That is good for this deck because Raging Bolt just needs to discard energy from anywhere on your board. So every time you get that extra attachment from the Teal Mask Ogerpon, that's an extra potential 70 damage that you can do. The Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, like I said, this pretty much autos Charizard. Prevent all damage from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. And if I'm not mistaken, this is also pretty good against Chien Palback's Caliber if they've already like discarded their Cologne or something. And then we also have Sandy Shocks. If you have 3 more energy in play, it does 90 damage for 1 energy. So this could take out like a Mimikyu or something, or it could just poke a single prizer. But note that Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon also goes through Mimikyu. So this isn't too far away from my list. I have cut the bug catching sets. I haven't been impressed by those. I'd rather play trekking shoes. I find most of the time with the bug catching set, I'm just hoping to hit like a grass energy or something because I already have my Ogerpons down. Yeah, bug catching set, maybe it'll find another deck, but I don't personally like it in this deck right now. I prefer trekking shoes and more generalizable consistency cards, because a lot of time the card I'm looking for isn't an Ogerpon or grass energy, or I could just go get the grass energy with Earthen Vessel or something. And we'll just look at another Raging Bolt Ogerpon list real quick to compare. We'll see this one is running trekking shoes and no bug catching set, like I mentioned. The Cornerstone Ogerpon is pretty common now in the lists. The Sandy Shocks EX is something I like because it's pretty much just a guaranteed extra 70 damage on your board every turn after your opponent has knocked something out. And you can even use Sandy Shocks as an attacker in a pinch, which sets itself up in just one turn. Attachment, magnetic plus Zeta, and it's ready to go. And then we also have, like I said, this Raging Bolt Lost Zone box deck. I don't think this is better than Raging Bolt Ogerpon because you can't even play like a fully single prize game, which is what I kind of want out of Lost Zone box in this format, looking at the metagame. Like something like Lost Zone box Radiant Charizard, or even Lost Zone box with Dragapult, and you have like, your single prize board that you present because of the Dracoloaks until you're ready to go in the Dragapult. This deck, I'm not too fond of it. Looks clunky. Running Chorus plus Zeta in the same deck. Not a fan. It got a decent result on this online tournament, I guess, but I would definitely play Raging Bolt Ogerpon 100% over that list. And we also have a Lost Zone box here, which we'll take a look at real quick. Sableye is very strong right now, especially against like Dragapult and Charizard. And I guess other Lost Zone box decks. Like Jirachi is in like a 0 decks right now. So if you can pop like a turn 2 Lost Mine, it's really scary. I also like playing Cologne in this kind of list, I think, because then you just have a couple of really strong available plays. Like if you get the turn 2 Lost Mine or the turn 2 Gust Cologne Shuriken, or if you're playing against a 2 prize deck, the turn 2 Lightning Rondo or something like that. So I like just having a lot of pop-off plays available for Lost Zone box because I think against the stage 2 decks like Charizard, like Dragapult, you need to just go aggressive and, get knock out double Dreepy, double Pidgey, double Charmander, whatever it is. So I like having options available to make that happen more often. And then we also have Reggie Drago V-Star at second place here. I had previously seen lists that were running Ogerpon EX plus Energy Switch, so you could Teal Dance and Energy Switch as your Energy Excel. This one's playing Gardenia, and I've just never really liked Gardenia. However, Earthen Vessel makes Gardenia playable because you could just go grab 2 grass energies. So it could be worse. But yeah, you have to use Gardenia on turn 1 or 2 if you want to attack on turn 2. And you also have to be attaching to Reggie Drago V with that. But Reggie Drago V-Star did gain a really, really great attacker in Dragapult EX now. So you can turn 2 attack using Dragapult EX, but with a V-Star, so you don't have to candy the Dragapult down. So this might just be the best way to use Phantom Dive on turn 2 consistently. Like I said, I might like the Teal Mask Ogerpon Energy Switch variant better. That as the engine for energy acceleration a little better. But the Gardenia's Vigor definitely can work because of the Earthen Vessel. And then the last deck here in top 8 is a Dragapult Pidgeot. This list was popularized by Shintaro Ito a few days ago. He played it in an online tournament to a top 4 finish, and yeah, it's pretty basic. 3 fire, 3 fire, 3 psychic, 1 neo upper, and then a Mela. That's like your energy plus energy acceleration. So my problem with this deck is still how susceptible it is to energy denial or like trying to lock something. I think this deck is just going to falter really badly to any kind of energy removal shenanigans, like maybe like Arceus, Aerodactyl V, so like some kind of Arceus control or stall or Pidgeot control, anything with hammers plus fan. Maybe even Buffalant plus Giovanni's Charisma. Yeah, I just think there's a lot of things that can take out this deck. Even like a turn 2 Lost Mine, knock out Pidgey Dreepy. That might just hinder their setup so much that you run over them. So this is strong in a like an intrinsic kind of way, but when I think externally about what's available in the meta and how can people react to this deck if it's actually that good, I feel like it's just very, very counterable. It's much more counterable than Charizard EX was, in my opinion, if we're comparing Dragapult to Charizard EX. Speaking of Charizard EX, in this tournament, we had the highest placement being my man Cash Vinder Singman playing Charizard Pidgeot EX. Let's take a look at what he was cooking here. We got the max belt, Defiance Band plus Kieran. So like Kieran can let you do 30 more damage. It can also be a switch. So that 30 more damage, let's say they've taken 2 prizes. Now your Charizard's swinging 270. And if you have a max belt, now it's swinging 320. That can knock out a Dragapult in one shot. It can also help you knock out Pidgeot EXs earlier than your opponent might think is possible as well. But yeah, there's a lot of ace specs to consider, like Unfair Stamp, Max Belt, Hero's Cape, Prime Catcher. They all have reason to be played in Charizard EX. So figuring out which one is best, it might just be the way that Tord went, and then I followed, and Liam Halliburton followed in his footsteps the week after by going just Prime Catcher because it's usable against every deck and it's usable most turns of the game. Whereas something like Unfair Stamp, Max Belt, they're both pretty niche, and then well, not pretty niche, but they're usable in specific scenarios, right? Like Unfair Stamp, you have to be knocked out and then you use it. So like example against stall or control, that might just not be very good. Or against a deck where you want to be more aggressive, it might not be very good. A Hero's Cape might not be very good against decks where they're already not one-shotting you, or like they don't one-shot you until the final turn of the game. Or, Jamming Tower just came out, so maybe if Jamming Tower is in Lugia, or Jamming Tower makes it into Charizard mirrors, then Hero's Cape loses some power. So I really like Prime Catcher still because it's just generally good every turn of the game and against any deck. So if I was playing Charizard, I would strongly be leaning towards Prime Catcher for that reason. All right, let's look at the next tournament. So this was on May 26th, and we had 148 players for this one. Looking at the metagame here. Now, also, just keep in mind, a metagame of 150 or 200 people playing online is going to be very different than, the percentage shares you'll see of a 2,700 person NAIC. A lot more people are going to be trying new decks here. A lot more people are going to be playing meta decks. So we'll see higher percentages of some of these new decks and decks that got new cards, like the Raging Bolt Ogerpon. But we see pretty similar meta shares here again, with Raging Bolt Ogerpon, Lugia, and Gardevoir, and Dragapult all being the most popular decks. Just a little note here for win percentages in this tournament. Actually, let's compare it to the other one. So, Tournament of Doom, this was May 24th. Gardevoir had a really great win percentage. Snorlax Stall had a horrendous win percentage. Dragapult Lost Zone Box had a good win percentage. But when you get into the lower numbers, it's kind of hard for those win percentages to really be taken seriously. I'd say the top, like, if there's like 10 or more decks, those win percentages might actually be something to look at. So we have Raging Bolt Ogerpon. The most popular deck being over 50% is always a good sign. If the most popular deck is over 50%, it's probably actually good. Lugia in this tournament did pretty poorly. Dragapult pretty poorly. Gardevoir did really, really well. Then we go over to this one a few days later. Raging Bolt Ogerpon looks like it's already getting countered. And then we have Lugia at 60% win rate. Gardevoir at 59% win rate. Dragapult 53%. Snorlax Stall 57% win rate. So Ogerpon maybe getting a little more prepared. And let's just look at the metagames for the next two as well while we're here, and then we'll go back and look at the deck lists. So this tournament was the same day, May 26th. Raging Bolt falling under 50% again. Dragapult falling. This is Dragapult Pidgeot, but Dragapult Pidgeot falling way under 50%. Lugia staying above 50%. Gardevoir falling under. So that's pretty interesting. But Raging Bolt Ogerpon still being the most popular deck. And then in this tournament, which was the 27th, Raging Bolt still the most popular deck. Lugia and Gardevoir picking up in popularity a little bit, staying just over 50% win rate. And then in this tournament, actually, Miraidon had a 58% win rate. Just checking out the matchups real quick here. So Miraidon farming the Lugias, of course, but also being farmed and returned by the Raging Bolt Ogerpons. Okay, so let's go back here and look at the list. So, Guardy actually won this tournament on the 26th. Let's take a quick look at the list. It's going with the Arven TM Evo plus Unfair Stamp, which, I've been back and forth. Do I like Irida Aroma? Do I like Arven Evo? Arven Evo, I think, feels safer, especially if we're going to have fast things in the format. If future hands will pop up, Miraidon will pop up. Even Raging Bolt can be kind of fast, but that's a pretty good matchup. I think I just like being able to choose second and go turn one evolution, have double curly on the board. As long as I'm protected by like a Manaphy, I'm going to go into the next turn with at least one Curlia. So I enjoy the TM Evo, I think. Although, like I said, I've been back and forth. But this is a solid list, regardless if you're going with the Aroma or the Evo. Second place, Reggie Drago V-Star again. Now, this time with the teal mask that I mentioned. This is the variant I think I like more. It just seems more consistent. And they're going very, very thin on the techs. Focusing with Dragapult EX, two of them. But then we also have, of course, the Noivern EX, which can completely wall out any all basic decks like Raging Bolt, Ogerpon. Of course, if we're copying Covert Flight with Reggie Drago, we're doing 70 damage a turn. The Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon can't be hit by Reggie Drago V-Star because it has the Legacy V-Star. So Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon actually gives this deck a pretty big issue as well. Because we don't have a Shred Attack in here anymore. We used to have the Shred Attack with Duraludon VMAX. So I wonder if we'll see something like Giratina V make it into this just for the Shred Attack. Or maybe we just attack with Dragon Laser. That's also possible. This can two-shot the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, so that might just be fine to do as well. Then we have Quad Iron Thorns in third place here. I've been trying this deck out a bit on PTCG Live. It definitely farms Lugia. Um, it's pretty good against Raging Bolt Ogerpon as well because they want to use rule box abilities, so you slow them down a lot. It can be really good against Charizard decks as well. Its weakness is certainly Dragapult because Dragapult itself doesn't have rule box abilities. Drakloak can use its abilities still. So you're going to want to hit your Crushing Hammers. You're going to want to hit your handheld fan to have on the active. You're going to want to hit Giovanni's Charisma and try to beat Dragapult that way. And honestly, this deck is stronger in this meta than I thought it would be. I was pretty excited to try this deck, but then realized that Iron Thorns and Dragapult would be coming out in the same set for us. But it actually isn't that bad. So Iron Thorns EX, Quad Iron Thorns EX, it's kind of gimmicky, but it farms Lugia, which is going to be a deck in the metagame. I actually think it beats Stall because it plays a Cologne or two, and you can knock out Mimikyu and Lost City it with that. And like I said, Raging Bolt Ogerpon, very, very popular deck, and this shuts it down. It makes it go really, really slow. Can they still beat you? Yes, but they're going to have a pretty good opening hand, I think, that doesn't rely on Squawkabilly or Radiant Greninja or Teal Dancing. They're just going to have the energy to discard and then the Sadist to play. And still, they have to discard 4 energy to knock out Iron Thorns. So it's going to take them a couple of turns to get that energy, most likely without their abilities due to the initialization ability. So Quad Thorns, be on the lookout. Might be a real deck. Then we've got some Dragapults here. So we've got Dragapult Xatu. I think Dragapult Xatu is like the easiest one to build, but I don't think it's the best variant. I have been I haven't been unimpressed with the deck, but I think it's very, very like above average in my opinion. I don't think Dragapult Xatu really does it for me. But this is a fine list if you want a list to go off of. These are all available on play.limitlesstcg.com. Then we have a Dragapult Pidgeot Charizard. Now, I think Draga Charizard is going to be the strongest Dragapult variant. Just in theory, on paper, I think that Dragapult Charizard should be the strongest. Charizard covers a lot of things that Dragapult struggles with. It covers Raging Bolt Ogerpon. It covers Blissey EX, especially in the late game. And it also gives you an energy acceleration option. So I'm not sure exactly how to build this deck, but this looks like a pretty good shot at it at the very least. You're probably going to struggle into Lugia with this because both Dragapult and Charizard struggle into Lugia. There's one Enhanced Hammer. I would probably like to see an Enhanced Hammer and a Sinnoh if you're trying to shore up the Lugia matchup, but Lugia is just one deck and you can't beat everything. Then we have one more Dragapult here. This is a Dragapult Xatu with a Klefki in it. And we have another Guardy list. This one's going to be the Arvin build again with Unfair Stamp. And then we also have top 8 Lugia. I've cut the water, the teal, not teal mask, the water Ogre Pond from my list. I think it's just too much. Like, Lugia just needs to set up and it wins. 3 Carmine's probably too much. I would want second Luminion instead of 3 Carmine. And maybe consider jamming Tower to better the Gardevoir matchup, but the Gardevoir matchup's already fine if your Legacy Energy sticks. And then ninth place, we'll just take a quick look at this ninth place Draga Charizard. So this one is without Pidgeot. And, you know, it's definitely viable to play without Pidgeot because you do have the support from Recon Directive, but it's just not nearly as good as Bibarel or Pidgeot, obviously, right? Like, you're looking at the top 2 and getting 1, that's great. Maybe if you have 2 up, you get to do it twice. 3 up, you get to do it 3 times. Still hard for it to hold a candle to Pidgeot and or Bibarel, though. And I actually wanted to check out this 10th place list real quick that's listed as other. Well, it's a Gouging Fire deck. I think Gouging Fire EX is underrated. Not as like a Tekken Charizard. I think it's very clunky in that regard. But I think it's underrated in terms of like the top 16 Champions League Sapporo list. This is doing something really interesting with the Dark Energy and Roaring Moon and the Monkey Dory and the Energy Switch. There's a lot going on here. And it's hard for this deck to see the pieces that it actually wants because it doesn't have a real draw engine past just concealed cards once a turn, or Squawk and Seize the first turn, or maybe restart for a card or two. So, in theory, if this deck functions, I think it's incredibly strong. It has a lot going for it with the Setas, the high damage output of Gouging Fire and Roaring Moon, and then Monkey Dory to add a little more damage into it. I think there's a lot of potential here. Not necessarily have to play the Roaring Moon, but I think it's a cute inclusion at the very least. I think this has potential. And on to the next tournament here. So this one, Lawson Box Radiant Sablezard one, piloted by Kazazuka, which if you don't know, this person was farming online events last format as well with Sablezard. So why not just do it again? And I did test out this list, hit some Raging Bolts on the ladder, and you know, we farm those. Hostel is a cool card I was looking at as well for Lawson Box. If something was knocked out last turn, you get to look at the top 8 and take 3 cards. So once you're done chorusing for the purpose of putting cards into the Lost Zone, Hostel just becomes like a super chorus. You get to keep 3 cards out of 8 instead of 3 cards out of 5. And the rest just get shuffled back, so you don't even lose them either. So a lot of times Lost Zone Box is going to have like a 8 to 12 card deck on like the final turns. So either Roxanne draw 6, or if you just are looking for a combo of 2 or 3 cards, you could hustle and probably find them in the late game. And it can even help in the mid game. You know, something gets KO'd, you need to find a Mirage Gate or a Gust or something, or energy for next turn. So this deck is going to be really good into a field of Raging Bull Ogerpon because you just trade really well with them. You knock out something with like a Cram plus Sableye, or just like a Cram, but you can also go, like, once they go down to 3 prizes, you knock out with Radzard. They knock it out, you knock something out. Then they go down to 1 and you're at 2, and you just take the last card, the last 2 prizes with Crisis Punch on a Cramorant for free, or Crisis Punch on a Radiant Charizard for free. So it also gives you a lot of time to get a plan together, especially against something like Raging Bolt, which doesn't have an option to take 2 prizes at once against a fully single prize board. And mentioning about how it farms Ogerpon, there were 6 Ogerpon in top 8 of this tournament. 1 Gardevoir, 1 Radiant Charizard Sable, or 1 Lost Zone Sablezard, along with the 6 Ogre Bolts and the Guardy. Guardy here playing Hyper Aroma and TM Evolution. I can't imagine that that is correct. I guess maybe it's for when you have to go first. But still, you could just evolution and play a better ace spec. I would rather have Unfair Stamp there. And then we have All Out Blitzel here with Pidgeot control. So there's some interesting stuff here. I've also tried out this list. I've been doing a lot of testing, just trying to dabble in all of the archetypes because I don't know what the heck I'm going to play for NAIC. So I've been just trying out everything to get some comfort in with it so I could just bring all the decks and decide the day before if I want. We got Great Tusk with Bedrock Breaker. We can Gust KO Minchinos with that against Lugia. Obviously, Luxray V is really strong. Blood Moon Ursaluna is really strong. We have the Water Ogerpon with Sob, so that can allow us to lock the opponent. So against Raging Bolt Ogerpon, I believe the whole plan is to just lock something in the active with Sob. I suppose if they aren't playing Cornerstone or like they're bench locked out of putting the Cornerstone down somehow, then you can just toss Mimikyu up. But yeah, this is All Out Blitzel's newest rendition of Control. Like I said, I tried it, won a couple games. If you have a mind for Control, you could definitely put the pieces together and figure out win cons against most things. But a very hard deck to play. And then we'll look at the last tournament here. Pidgeot Control actually won this one. I think we're just looking at the same list again. They just net decked it from All Out Blitzel, so same kind of card availability here. And looking at their matchups, they beat 3 Raging Bolt Ogerpon, a Guardy, an Iron Thorns, 2 Lugias, and Dragapult Charizard. So you can see a lot of interesting stuff by looking at the matchups on these tournaments as well. And then also in top 8 were 2 Guardies, a Raging Bolt Ogerpon, a Lost Zone Giratina. Let's see, playing Unfair Stamp as the ace spec, a Temple of Sinnoh, Blood Moon Ursaluna, and we have a Charizard Pidgeot in here as well. They're playing a Chi U EX. That's pretty interesting. So you could you can't 2-shot. You can 3-shot a Cornerstone Ogerpon with Flame Surge, but they're going to knock you out first if they already have the energy to attack with. So I guess you could also do 2-shot Flame Surge plus Kieran, or Flame Surge with a max belt would 2-shot the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, and then maybe Chi EX also acts as a counter against Stall, I'd say, if you can keep your board clear of other cards. You do only have one Turo, one Kieran, no. Oh, no, it does play Pal Pad. So maybe if you don't lose your Pal Pad, you can actually make Chi work against Stall and or Control question mark. I'm not too sure on the Chi, but it's definitely interesting, especially with Kieran and Max Belt, so you can take out the Cornerstone in 2 shots with that. That's a really interesting tech. Maybe better than the Gouging Fire. And then there's also a Miraidon here, and I looked at this the other day. I think it's just the Champions League Sapporo first place 60. So nothing really to write home about here with this list. And yeah, that's the summation of online tournaments so far in Twilight Masquerade. We see that Pidgeot Control is still definitely viable. We see Gardevoir is getting better with Monkey Dory plus other good matchups appearing in the metagame. Raging Bolt Ogerpon is the number 1 aggro deck. Dragapult, I think, has kind of taken Charizard Pidgeot's place a little bit as the premier, like, stage 2 kind of mid-rangey thinking deck, especially with the Pidgeot build and the Charizard build. I do think that the Lost Zone box build is really, really cool because you can present fully single prize boards, so I really like it for that reason. Lugia is cracked. If Lugia gets turn 2 Archeops, it's beating like everything. Except Miraidon maybe, and Future Hands maybe, but and Quad Iron Thorns. Okay, so it's not beating everything, but it beats a lot of stuff. Lugia is so powerful, but the consistency and reliability is really what keeps it down usually. Snorlax stall is pretty strong. It's scared of Lugia. Lost Zone box is pretty strong, especially if you're going for that like consistent turn 2 Lost Mine or Shuriken kind of build. Charizard Pidgeot is still a fine deck, but I think there's a lot that you're going against the grain with. Like, you're worried about Cornerstone, you're worried about Stall, you're worried about Lugia, you're worried about Dragapult, you're worried about Control. You're worried about, I don't know, maybe Gardevoir because it got a little bit stronger now. So just a lot for Charizard to account for, which is my biggest issue with it right now. It's still intrinsically strong, but it has a lot to account for. So let me know what y'all think about this, if I missed anything, what you think about these online tournament results. Raging Bolt Ogerpon, I definitely think it's going to be popular. First or second most popular NAC Masters Division as of now. Of course, like I said, things can change with the Japan National Championships, so check back for my analysis of those when they happen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.